Imagine planning your dream wedding, choosing the dress, the flowers, trusting the people you love the most. Now imagine discovering, just days before, that your fiancé and your sister were hiding the cruelest secret behind your back. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the strength it takes to stand up after the world you built collapses. I always thought the worst pain would be losing someone to death, but I was wrong. Because being betrayed by the two people you love the most, while they're still breathing and pretending to love you back, feels 1,000 times worse. Her name is Claire. She's my little sister. 2 years younger, full of light, spontaneous. The kind of woman who walks into a room and makes everyone turn. Growing up, I always protected her. From bullies, from heartbreaks, from our parents' expectations. She used to call me her shield. Funny how that shield didn't protect me from her. Jason and I met 4 years ago. He wasn't just the man I was going to marry. He was my best friend, my safe place. He proposed on our 2nd anniversary with candles and string lights, and my favorite Fleetwood Mac song playing softly in the background. I cried, of course, and I said yes, with every piece of my heart. We set the wedding for spring. Everything was falling into place. The venue, the dress, the cake, even the guest list. Claire had recently broken up with her boyfriend. She was fragile, heartbroken. So I did what any sister would do. I invited her to stay with us for a while. Jason didn't object. He was always kind to her. Maybe too kind? At first, it felt innocent. She'd joke around with him during dinner, laugh at all his jokes, louder than necessary. He'd ask her opinion on things we used to decide together. I told myself it was nothing, just two people being friendly. But little things started piling up. I'd walk into a room and they'd suddenly go quiet. I'd find her sweatshirt on the couch where Jason usually sat. Once I saw a text from her on his phone. "You always know how to make me smile." I asked him about it. He shrugged, said it was just a friendly message. Claire was lonely. He was just being supportive. And like a fool, I believed him. Or rather, I wanted to believe. One evening, I came home early from a florist appointment. The living room lights were dimmed. There was laughter, soft, intimate laughter. I peeked through the hallway. They were sitting close on the couch. Too close. Jason was pouring wine. Claire was barefoot, legs tucked under her, smiling like she was in love. I walked in, heart pounding. Claire looked up and jumped, startled. Jason stood quickly. "You're back early," he said, voice flat. "Yeah," I replied. "The florist canceled. I figured I'd surprise you." Claire gave a nervous laugh. "We were just talking." I nodded slowly. Didn't ask more, didn't accuse, but something inside me shifted that night. Something that had been quietly cracking finally snapped. That was the moment I knew. My wedding might still be on paper, but my relationship was already over. I started paying attention. The way he smiled more when she was around. How her perfume lingered in the hallway near his office. How she suddenly started dressing up just to stay home. Then the final straw. I was up late one night, trying to finalize our wedding seating chart. Jason was asleep upstairs. I went to plug in my phone in the kitchen and noticed his buzzing on the counter. The screen lit up. It was a message from Claire. "Claire, we shouldn't do this." Claire, "But I can't stop thinking about last night." Claire, "She'll find out eventually." My stomach dropped. I froze. My hands shook. I stared at the screen, hoping, begging for some logical explanation. There was none. I didn't cry, not then. I just shut down, cold. I took a screenshot. Then I opened the security app linked to our home cameras, something Jason insisted we install for protection. Turns out they recorded more than just movement outside the house. I found footage from 4 nights ago. Claire had come home late. Jason was downstairs. She leaned in to say something, and then they kissed. Long, passionate, familiar. I paused the video and stared at the still frame. His hand on her waist, her eyes closed, like lovers. Not a mistake, not a slip, a choice. I sat there in the dark for hours. My world collapsed quietly, without a scream. The next morning, I acted normal. I made breakfast. I smiled. I told Jason I'd be gone most of the day visiting wedding vendors. He kissed me on the cheek. Claire waved from the couch. The betrayal stung sharper in the daylight, but I had a plan. That afternoon, I drove to my mother's house. I didn't tell her anything. I just asked if I could borrow the white robe she wore on her wedding day. She looked at me, confused, but handed it over. Then I drove to a boutique and bought a cheap veil. Not because I wanted to get married, but because I needed to see myself clearly. At home, I put on the robe, the veil, and stood in front of the mirror. I looked like a ghost bride, not the glowing woman Jason once loved, not the sister Claire used to admire, but a shell. And something inside me whispered, "This is not the ending you deserve." So I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. I typed a message to Jason. "Can we have dinner at home tonight? Just the three of us. I want us to connect one last time before the wedding." He replied instantly, "Of course, babe. That sounds perfect." Claire responded an hour later. "Looking forward to it." I smiled to myself, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was the calm before the storm. That night, they would see me clearly, and for the first time, they'd have to look at what they broke. That night, I didn't eat. I moved from room to room like a ghost, waiting for the moment everything would collapse out loud. Still, I set the table like nothing was wrong. Candlelight, wine glasses, cloth napkins, soft music playing, salmon grillado, garlic mashed potatoes, my signature dinner. Jason came down first, smiling like a man without guilt. Claire followed, wearing a dress I hadn't seen in months. It used to be mine. She looked radiant, too radiant. We sat around the table like family. They talked, laughed, toasted. I watched them, silent, savoring every word they said, because I knew it would be their last meal with me. Halfway through dinner, I leaned forward, calmly. "Do either of you have something to tell me?" Jason blinked. Claire stiffened. "What do you mean?" Jason asked, tilting his head. "Something important. Something you've been hiding." They exchanged glances. Claire looked down at her plate. Jason gave a weak smile. "You're scaring me," he said with a nervous laugh. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. On the screen, a still image from the security footage. Them, kissing. Jason's face turned white. Claire's fork dropped to the floor. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. "How long?" I asked. Jason opened his mouth, but no sound came. Claire whispered, barely audible, "It was a mistake." "Was it? Just one? Or many?" I snapped. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, cold, precise. Jason finally spoke. "We didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened. We were both lonely and confused. Number. You were selfish." Claire's eyes welled up with tears. "I didn't plan this," she said. "I swear. But I felt alive again with him." "You felt alive? With my fiancé?" I stood. The table remained untouched. The candles flickered like tiny judges watching them burn. Jason stood too. "Let me explain." "No." I raised a hand. "Now I talk. You listen." They froze. "You had choices. You could have stopped. You could have told me, but you didn't. You pretended. You lied. And you made me feel like I was crazy for sensing the truth." Claire sobbed. Jason looked down at his plate like it could save him. "The wedding is off," I said firmly. "Jason, you're leaving this house tonight. Claire, you have until the morning." I picked up my phone and walked to the bedroom, locked the door, sat on the bed, and then I cried. Not quiet tears. Number. I cried like a woman breaking open, cried from the core, from the bones. The pain was blinding, but it was also cleansing. I didn't sleep much. In the morning, they were both gone. A note sat on the kitchen table. They said they were sorry, that they'd lost themselves, that maybe one day I'd understand. I wouldn't, and I didn't want to. I spent the rest of the day canceling everything: the florist, the band, the venue, the dress, the cake. Each call was another funeral for a dream I didn't realize had already died. My mother came by later. She didn't ask questions. She just held me and said, "You're stronger than this storm, and storms always pass." I wanted to believe her. But that night, I still felt like I was drowning. The days that followed were a blur. I'd wake up, then somehow fall asleep again without remembering how. The pain was constant, not sharp anymore, just heavy, like carrying wet clothes on your soul. I canceled the honeymoon. I boxed up the wedding decorations. I replaced our shared bed with a single one. Symbolic? Maybe, but it helped. Jason's photos were deleted from my phone, but I couldn't bring myself to touch the framed ones in the hallway. It hurt too much. And yet, somehow, it hurt more to imagine erasing them completely. I didn't leave the apartment for days. Friends texted. My mother brought soup. She'd sit with me quietly, knowing sometimes silence was the best comfort. I kept replaying it all, every laugh they shared, every time I dismissed my gut. How blind I was, or maybe how much I wanted to stay blind. One night, I had a dream. I was walking down a hallway full of closed doors. Behind each door, I heard muffled laughter. When I opened one, I saw Jason and Claire, dressed in wedding clothes, laughing together, pointing at me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. That morning, I looked in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Sunken eyes, pale skin, lifeless expression. That's when I decided I needed help. A friend referred me to a therapist. In our first session, I couldn't speak. I just cried and cried. The therapist waited patiently, then gently said, "Pain doesn't mean weakness. It means you loved deeply, and that's not a flaw." I clung to those words. I started going weekly. I unpacked the guilt, the shame, the anger. Yes, shame, because even though I was the one betrayed, I still felt humiliated. Therapy taught me that love doesn't guarantee loyalty. That betrayal isn't about me not being enough. It's about who they chose to be. Little by little, I stepped outside again. I returned to the park where Jason proposed. At first it hurt. Every tree, every bench was a memory, but over time, the place lost its grip. It became just a park with trees and dogs and life. One day, I sat on the same bench. I closed my eyes, breathed, and for a split second, I felt peace. Not joy, not yet, but something soft, like a seed trying to sprout through cracked concrete. I began journaling, writing every thought, raw, uncensored. And through those words, I found a version of me I didn't know existed, a version that was angry, but also brave, broken, but not destroyed. I responded to Claire's long messages with one sentence. "I hope you one day understand what you broke." She kept sending voicemails, letters, even tried showing up at my door, but I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Jason vanished. Moved to another city, I heard. I didn't care to know more. He was a chapter I had no interest in rereading. Instead, I started falling in love with my own company. Loneliness wasn't scary anymore. It was peaceful. Mine. The pain didn't vanish overnight. But one day I realized it no longer controlled me. It was like a scar, visible, tender, but no longer bleeding. And that realization changed everything. I started going out more. Returned to the small cafe I used to write in before Jason. Same corner table, a new notebook, a cappuccino in hand. At first, I just scribbled phrases, fragments of thoughts, then full paragraphs. And soon, stories. Stories not about betrayal, but about rebuilding. That's where I met Olivia. She was older, silver-haired, eyes that held entire novels of pain and wisdom. One morning, she noticed I was crying as I wrote. She approached, no hesitation. "That's good," she said, gesturing to my tears. "Means you're writing something true." We became friends. She told me about her own divorce, 25 years of marriage, undone by a secret affair. But she didn't speak bitterly. She spoke like someone who had bled and healed. She said, "Love doesn't end. It just changes address. Sometimes It returns home. To you. She invited me to a small creative writing group every Thursday. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to read aloud, but I went. I sat in the circle, shaking, and read my story. When I finished, silence filled the room, then a single clap, then more, until everyone was applauding. For the first time since the breakup, I felt strong, not because they approved, but because I had found my voice. I started running again. I used to go 3 times a week before Jason. He always said running was hard on my knees. Now, with my playlist blasting and sneakers hitting pavement, I felt free. Each step let go of something I didn't need anymore. I took my first solo trip to a small cabin in the mountains. 3 days of writing, hiking, breathing. I met an old man on one of the trails, Arthur, nearly 80 years old. He told me his wife had cheated on him at 50. He thought his life was over. Then he smiled and said, "At 60, I fell in love again. At 70, I moved to the countryside. At 79, I'm the happiest I've ever been. Life doesn't rush, but it doesn't wait, either." I wrote his words in my journal. I started noticing beauty in small things again. Morning silence, fresh bread, the weight of a new book in my hands, little signs that the world was still spinning, and I was still in it. People noticed. A woman from the writing group said, "You shine, even when your stories talk about pain." I smiled. A real smile. One day, the cafe owner messaged me. He'd read one of my pieces I submitted to a local contest. He wanted to publish it in the community journal. I said yes, no hesitation, no fear. Bit by bit, I was becoming a woman I would have admired back then. Not perfect, not pain-free, but whole. And that was enough. Months had passed. Autumn had arrived. Cool winds, golden leaves crunching beneath my boots. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. One ordinary afternoon, I stepped out of the bookstore with a warm chai and a fresh notebook. That's when I saw her, Claire, standing across the street, staring into a window display. Her hair was shorter, she looked thinner, tired. My instinct was to turn around, walk away, avoid the wreckage. But something inside me whispered, "You're not afraid anymore." So I crossed the street. Claire looked up. Her eyes widened, filled instantly with tears. She didn't move. I stopped a few feet away. She whispered, "You look good." I nodded, calm. "I'm doing better." She wiped a tear quickly. "I've wanted to talk to you for months." "You did talk," I said. "Through messages, voicemails, letters. I needed to say I'm sorry, in person." I looked at her, not the villain in my nightmares, not the thief of my trust, just Claire, a woman I once loved like a second self, now a stranger with my sister's face. She said, "He left. Not long after. We don't talk anymore." I stayed silent. She continued, voice cracking, "I ruined everything, and I think about it every single day." A long pause. The street noises filled the space between us. Then I said, "I don't hate you, Claire, but I also can't have you in my life. Not now. Maybe never." Her shoulders dropped. She nodded slowly. "I understand." We didn't hug. We didn't promise to stay in touch. We just stood there breathing the same air for one last time. Then I turned around and walked away. And to my surprise, it didn't hurt. That evening, I sat at my desk and wrote until midnight. The words came freely, no longer as cries, but as testimony. I submitted one of my stories to a local competition, not to win, but to be seen. Days later, I received an email. My piece had been selected for publication in a collection of new female authors. At the launch event, I stood in a small bookstore, holding a book with my name printed inside. Not Jason's fiancé, not Claire's sister, just me. A man approached me afterward. He had tears in his eyes. "Your story, it reminded me of something I've been avoiding for years," he said. "Thank you for your honesty. We talked for 10 minutes. He made me laugh. For the first time, I felt open to the idea of smiling with someone new. No expectations, just openness. When I got home, I wrote this in my journal. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become after. That night, I slept with the window open. The autumn breeze carried in the scent of fallen leaves, and I dreamed, not of the past, but of pages yet to be written. Today marks exactly 1 year since the day I was supposed to get married. I woke up early, made myself a slow cup of coffee, put on soft music, and sat on the balcony with my journal in my lap. The same journal that once held my darkest nights. Now it holds poems, letters to myself, little sparks of light. I looked up at the sky and whispered, I survived. But more than that, I became. Most people think healing means forgetting, but I remember everything. The betrayal, the silence, the way my heart cracked open like glass dropped in slow motion. I remember it all. But those memories, they don't own me anymore. They're just chapters, not the ending. Jason and Claire never returned to my life. Last I heard, they both moved away. I don't wish them harm. I don't wish them well either. I just don't wish them anything. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't for the people who broke you. It's for the part of yourself still bleeding for answers you'll never get. I started wearing colors again, started dancing in my apartment, started choosing joy, sometimes quietly, sometimes boldly. I launched a small blog, nothing fancy, just a space for women like me, women with scars and stories and strength they forgot they had. Thousands of them came, reading, commenting, sharing their own broken truths. It felt like building a lighthouse from wreckage. Every message I received echoed the same thing. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. I feel less alone now. I didn't need millions of followers. I didn't need applause. I just needed to know that turning my pain into something useful meant I hadn't bled in vain. This afternoon I took a walk through the park, the same park where Jason once proposed. There was a couple there, holding hands, laughing softly. For the first time I didn't feel jealousy. I felt peace. Not because I found someone new, but because I finally found myself. Later, I sat in my room with that same old journal. I flipped to the first page, the one where I'd written, I don't know how to go on, and underneath it I wrote, but I did, and I will, over and over again. Because this story wasn't about him, or her. It was about the woman who refused to end her story where it got ugly, who turned the ashes into ink, and used it to rewrite her life. Because after all that loss, I discovered the most beautiful love story was the one I wrote for myself. The end. Every story you hear on this channel is based on true events. We share them so others know they're not alone. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe. There are many more real stories waiting to be told.